Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all said, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class today. Andy is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. If you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. My good friend Kurt Wilson is with us, the armchair survivalist. He's a broadcaster. His website, armchairsurvivalist.com. Also, SE1.us. That's SE1.us. Welcome, Kurt.
Welcome, Vinny. What's happening?
I was thinking, we're going to talk about spring cleaning today. And, that's going to turn a lot of people off until they realize what we're going to talk about. But I wanted to share with you a couple thoughts before we get into spring cleaning. And that was special tools. Because yesterday, it's kind of funny how this works out with Kurt and me. We seem to be doing the same kind of things around the same time, literally. So we were talking yesterday on the phone, and he mentioned spring cleaning, and that's what I was doing. Now, when I talk about spring cleaning, I wanted to, Kurt and class, I'm converting our dining room into a studio because it's closer to the center of operations in our farmhouse. And I wanted to hang some artwork that is from the 1800s, large portraits, very large portraits. And they used to make something called picture rail. Now, you all know what chair rail is. That's that molding that goes, on the wall. So when your back of your chair bumps into the wall, it doesn't gouge out the wall. It's protected by the chair rail. Well, picture rail is right near the ceiling, usually about between 10 and 18 inches from the ceiling. It runs around the room, and it's radiused at the top of this molding, and you can put these flat hooks on it and just hook them onto the picture rail, and then with a fancy rope of some kind or wire, you can hang your pictures. And you see that kind of thing sometimes in older Victorian homes. Well, that's what I wanted to use in the studio. Can't find it anywhere. I've called all the mills, all the lumber supply companies. No one has picture rail around here in Missouri. So I had to do some spring cleaning, went into the garage, and behind like 7 things was the router table. This is made out of wood and has the router on it, and so I'm going to make my own molding, but I had to get it out. So I had to do some spring cleaning in order to get the router table out from behind the extra washers, washing machines that we have behind the old antique car that we have in there, behind the meat saw, and it's all behind that stuff. So I had to move everything to get the router table out so I could make this picture rail molding. And so that leads me into this, Kurt, special tools. And I'd like to take a couple minutes, if you don't mind, and talk about special tools that I've bought over the years that have served me very well. Some of them were very inexpensive, and they're really handy, and they're the right tool. And what I mean by that is I was telling Andy, our engineer, before, just as we were going on the air, I was saying, the first half of my life, I would do the job, and then I'd go, you know what, I really need the right tool to do the job. I'd finish the job, and then I'd buy the tool. I don't do that anymore. I buy the tool before.
You're doing it fast backward.
Yeah. So now, for the second half of my life, I've been buying the tool. I don't buy it on the spur of the moment. I try to find the tool at the right price, and I try not to lose it, and I try not to let people borrow it because they're not as careful with my tools as I am. So that's the approach that I've taken. And one example of a very, very inexpensive tool that I think you should all have if you decide to paint, whether you paint inside or outside, if you're going to use gallon cans or quart cans, metal cans I'm talking about, is there is a paint lid opener. And it looks kind of like something you might pry a bottle cap off, like a soda bottle of years ago. And the other end is kind of like a screwdriver, but it's curved. And it fits right under the lid, and it pops that lid off without damaging the lid as a screwdriver would. So have you ever used one of those, Kurt?
Yeah, I've got 5 or 6 of them out in the garage.
Yeah. Well, you're ahead of me. I only have 2.
Oh.
But
by the way, you don't have to. You don't know this, but for 5 years I sold artwork. And years ago, and I got to the point where I was making my own frames. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so molding is molding. You just have to get what you want. But there's a place called thejoyofmoldings.com.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that's where you can buy picture rail there, $1.52 a foot.
Okay. I need 64 feet. I need 64 feet.
You might want to get wholesale or something. But you can make, first, see, you have to do this. I've done this. What you're doing, what you're talking about, I've done it. And I had to do it backwards. I had to find the hooks first. And then they kind of look like shower hooks, shower curtain hooks.
Right.
And they are actually made to fit different specific moldings, usually the rounded top. Right. So I found the hooks first, and then I went to the hardware store, and they didn't have a Lowe's then. They had something else. And I just looked for something to fit it. And it was real simple. That's exactly the approach that I'm taking. And I found out that the radius is you can use 3/4 inch millwork. Just maybe I should call it standard lumber that you'd get. I'm going to rip down a 1x12, which is 3/4 of an inch thick and 12 inches wide. I'm talking about something like for shelving. I'm going to use that. I'm going to rip it down. Ripping class means you saw with the grain. So I'm going to saw these boards on a table saw along the grain, and probably I'm going to make 1.5 inch wide boards out of a 12-inch board. And the reason for that is it's less expensive if you buy it that way.
Oh yeah.
And there was molding at $1.52 a foot. All right, and that's cheap. So you're looking for good molding. If you go to Home Depot and you look for molding, you can figure it out yourself. That stuff is not cheap. And if you rip it yourself, you have the choice and option of finding the right piece of wood. You got to be careful, no nuts. See, I did this. This is what we did in Portland, Oregon, in these old Victorian houses. I worked with a contractor who would rebuild these houses exactly like they used to be. You got to make sure. Some people are going to do this. I think I'll save some money and I'll buy that preformed molding. Okay. First time you try and put weight on it, it's going to snap.
Right. Right. It needs to be a substantial kind of wood. You just can't use number 4 pine. It's got to be quite substantial. And the reason I want to do it now, before I paint, is I've identified where all the studs are. So I want to actually screw this in with long, narrow screws through the sheetrock into the studs, so it will be able to hold this artwork, because some of it is really heavy. And what I'm talking about are these portraits from the early 1800s of all these, men, and we have a couple women, no smiles, because I don't think they have teeth. Literally.
Yeah.
So these very heavy frames that are wood with decorated plaster on the wood, and they're kind of a gold leaf, many of them, but not all of them. But that's what I want to hang, because we have this artwork. It's been in my family for a very long time, and I don't think it's doing any good just being in boxes in the closet. So I'm going to put it in the studio. So that's.
I'm laughing because I have a whole closet devoted solely to artwork.
to pictures. Like I have pictures. I have 4 pictures, Remington pictures I bought 30 years ago in frames that were framed in the 1920s, and they weigh about 30 pounds each.
That's what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. These are large portraits.
Picture rail molding, hanging hooks, bronze. Pack of 25, $8.
Okay. That's what I want to get. So these are kind of a brass colored?
Yeah, but I'm sure there's other ones out there.
What I'm looking for, I'd like them to be made out of steel so that they're strong enough and won't bend, because the last thing I want is to have this artwork fall. But in the studio, it won't look like a traditional radio studio when we're done with it. It's in a room that has a ceiling. Right now I've got scaffolding in there because I'm spackling. I've used over a 5-gallon bucket of spackle so far, to just tweak the joints the way I like them.
I hate to see you do body work on a car.
I'd go out of business.
You probably use 5 pounds of Bondo.
I'd go out of business because it takes me forever. Well, you know why? What I do when I spackle a wallboard joint, let's say it's the joint, the long joint, the 8-foot or the 12-foot joint, I fill it with spackle first. Then I wet the tape, paper tape, and then I apply the tape, and then I squeeze the spackle out, and then I put like 4 coats more on there. So what I really do is I bond the 2 pieces of sheetrock. And the sheetrock, I'm not happy with nailing it. I'm only happy with gluing it to the studs and then screwing it onto the studs.
Boy, the next person after you that has to replace that sheetrock is going to go, who the hell is this monster?
Well, it increases the wind load of the house because it keeps the 2x6s from twisting a little bit. So we probably pick up another maybe 30 miles an hour in wind load.
Do you sand your spackle or do you wash it?
Both. I have something made by Goldblatt, I believe the name is, and it's a swivel head sander on the end of a pole, and it's great, but you get covered in dust, so you have to wear a respirator when you do that. So I have another kind of a sander that attaches to a vacuum, and we would use the whole house vacuum, but I use a kind of a small towel, and I wet it and fix it that way. Final finish would be with a wet cloth towel. Kurt Wilson's with us, and we're talking about specialty tools. Now, not all of these are specialty tools, but some of the tools that we can discuss are tools that you might want to consider buying. So I wanted to buy a router, and because I sold my router, my Craftsman router, when I lived in Virginia, we just couldn't take everything with us. So I sold it, and I really wasn't all that happy with it. So I ended up buying a Freud, F-R-E-U-D brand router, half-inch arbor, and it's made in Spain, and it's pretty darn heavy duty. And so there was a guy on Craigslist that was selling it for $50. I couldn't believe it. $50 for this really heavy-duty router. I'm talking very heavy. And so I called him up, and I went over there, and he had this router, and I said, well, I'd like to buy that if that's okay. He said, okay. He said, do you want the table with it? And he made a really, really sophisticated stand and table out of wood that you can work at standing up. So that's great. And he said, and I've got these router bits that are brand new. There's a whole case of them, $25 if you'd like those. And I said, boy, that'd be great. And he said, you know what? You want these two? I had a handful, literally maybe 25 other router bits. He said, you want these? We'll throw them in. What a great deal, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a butt there?
No. Well, yeah. And I said, is there anything else you're selling? And he said, well, yeah, I've got this table saw, and it was a Grizzly brand table saw, cast iron table saw with cast iron extensions, and it was a 10-inch. And I have a 12-inch, but 12-inch is just kind of cumbersome. It's just too big. So he wanted $125 for that, and he had the roller legs or the roller stand that the legs sit on, so you can roll it around. Because a table saw is a pain in the neck, because if you have a cast iron one, it's pretty heavy. So you really need the roller legs, or the stand with the roller platform. And then he had some extra blades, and it was all for $125. So there are a couple points that you can learn from this little bit of discussion class with Kurt Wilson and me. One is, if you go to one of these sales or one of these Craigslist offerings, you might want to ask the question, is there anything else that you're selling that I might be interested in? And that's what happened with us, right?
Hey, did that get that unit, that table saw you get, did it have the vacuum attachment?
No, it didn't have that. No, that would be kind of nice, huh? But I suppose I could make that.
Yeah, you can make it easily enough. I worked one whole summer on a table saw for ripping Pecky cedar and redwood.
Yeah.
So there's tricks to doing it without getting really damaged. You know, you're lucky. You got so much room to put tools, man.
Well, I was thinking about that. And I'd love to blame Mrs. Finelli for this collection of all kinds of things that we have. But we have things that are in the way of things that are in the way of things that are in the way of where we want to get to. And we've got like a maze in part of our, in our basement. And there are things that we have that we don't know we have. And that's because we've consolidated 4 houses into one over the years. And I've inherited the tools from my grandfather and my father, and our son has some tools, and he lives here. So we have, we have a lot of tools, and the point is that if you buy quality tools, they can last way more than a lifetime. They can last several generations. And the interesting thing about the table saw and the router is it seems to be a dying art. And what I'm saying is that the people who would use a router, I don't think they're making very many of them anymore, people that can use a router or a table saw. So the people who are selling them...
Especially when you can go over to Home Depot and buy almost what you want already pre-made, and in many cases pre-stained and pre-painted.
Right.
So we're
out
losing...
of plastic sometimes.
Yeah. We're losing quality workmen. We're losing them.
Absolutely. So the people who have had these, who are in their 70s and 80s, want to get them out of the garage because they may live in a house that was built in the 60s and they don't have very much space. They only have a 1-car garage, and they may want to get rid of that table saw and some of those other big tools that they have, and they're going to sell them relatively inexpensively. So keep that in mind. That's who's selling them, not the young people. Kurt Wilson's with us. And so, Kurt, during the break, I looked at Craigslist around, our neck of the woods in Missouri, and there are plenty of 10 and 12-inch table saws for about $150. And so, class, if you're thinking about getting one, it would be nice to have one with the cast iron extensions on the side, on the right and the left sides. Cast iron because, well, it doesn't warp, and it's very strong, and it doesn't move. I've used a Craftsman with stamped steel extensions, and it's lousy. It really is lousy. So if you can get one with cast iron extensions or wings, that would be the way to go. Your thoughts, Kurt?
Well, let me. Yeah, my thoughts are. Used to be. When the public schools actually gave a damn about putting people through them and teaching them life lessons, you had shop class, and you were taught the idea. Nowadays, and I'm very serious about this. The people that are coming out of high school now are stupid as a bag of used spaghetti, and they will, while a table saw is running, see if they can touch it. So the concept of common sense is gone. If you're going to buy a tool, learn how to use it. And I hate to say this, but YouTube will show you how to use a table saw safely so you don't kill yourself. This plant that I worked at, we ripped 12-foot long sections of redwood and Pecky cedar. And I had all the work I wanted to do. I could work 12 hours a day. Why? Because the guy that had the other shift ended up killing himself. He was running redwood, and he wasn't paying attention, and he hit a knot, and it bucked back, and he wasn't wearing his leather apron, and it went right through his stomach. So, you're going to get a tool. It's great to get it, but learn how to use it safely. And remember, you're usually allowed one mistake per lifetime. And with these kind of things, it's like I was a master gunsmith for 25 years. And you're talking about specialty tools, dude. I had to make most of my stuff.
Right. And that was something else I wanted to get into during the broadcast today, that I have made some specialty tools that I needed it once, and there was no tool that I needed. And so I made those tools, and I still have them. And, I thought I would use them only once, but I've used them a number of times. And many times I would not have been able to do the job without having made those specialty tools. That's just the way it is.
Well, are you familiar with an M1 Garand?
Yeah, we have one.
Okay, the M1 Garand, you have a gas plug at the top of it, and it depending on the model of the Garand, it's a little screw. It's only about an inch long, and it's about a half an inch diameter, and it screws in and locks on the gas port. Well, you have to unscrew and screw that on when you're doing a good, thorough cleaning of the weapon. And the government made these tools that you could put on there, and they would fit in a buttstock, and you could take it out and assemble it, and you put it on, and then you could proceed to twist that tool in half because it wasn't strong enough. So I've worked on thousands of M1 Garands, thousands of them. So I ended up going to Sears, which is another topic. I ended up going to Sears and finding a big screwdriver, and I mean big one, about 1.5 feet long, that would fit. The head would fit into that slot. And then I proceeded to heat it up and bend it 90-degree angle. And now I have a tool that will take off even the most stubborn gas plug. And I still can have it. It's sitting right over here next to me. Now, Sears, is your Sears closing?
Some of the Sears around here are. The one in Springfield, I've been there, and the employees tell me, "Oh, no, Sears is here to stay. We're making money now." That's what they've been told, I guess. But yeah, and I was looking around. There were more employees than there were customers, and there were very few employees. I mean, that store is empty.
Sears is going. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, and the employees are the last people that they tell. What they do is Friday, they say, out of the blue, here's 2 weeks severance. Nice knowing you. Bye. And then Monday, they have a crew that's from out of state that comes in, and all they're doing is selling off everything, all the assets that are there. They did that here in Coeur d'Alene. This is the only Sears within 100 miles of here, and they're closing down.
Yeah.
And they'll be out. They'll be told Kmart closed down already about 6 months ago. Sears will be done. If it's not done now, it'll be done by the end of this month. They're even selling the displays and all of that stuff. And do you remember? I'm old enough that I remember when Montgomery Ward's was the cat's meow, and that's where everybody went. And that they're gone. Do you remember Whitefront?
No.
There was Whitefront. There was E-Mart. There was obviously Woolworths.
The Woolworths, yes. FW Woolworths, sure.
Yeah. So there's all of these big places. It's just the cycle of business. This is what happens.
It's horrible. It's horrible. I have a set of a small 1/4-inch ratchet set. Absolutely awesome. I mean, this is a very, very fine-tooth ratchet set that I bought probably in the late 1960s, and it was branded Power Craft, which was the Montgomery Ward's equivalent of Craftsman. So a Power Craft tool is guaranteed for life. The only problem is that the company that guaranteed it is no longer in business, which I think is what's going to happen with Sears Craftsman, guaranteed for life. Well, the Craftsman brand, I think, unless it's bought,
Black and Decker bought it. Black and Decker bought it.
Are they going to honor the warranty?
I don't know. because here's the reason that Sears went down is because they can't compete with China. They can't compete with Harbor Freight. I would go through a dozen pin punches a month, and I just go simply buy them at Sears because they didn't even question. I bring in a bent or broken punch, they give me a brand new one. Well, now every Chinese manufacturer there is gives a lifetime warranty. So especially at Harbor Freight. So instead of spending $4.99 for a punch, I can go to Harbor Freight and spend $6.99 for 12 of them.
Right.
And if they break or bend or whatever, I take them back to give me another one.
Well, I bought a pin punch because I needed to drive out some roll pins on a Lotus Europa for the drive shafts on the axle shafts. And this was back in the 70s, and I bought a Craftsman, and it was an awesome, absolute world-class pin punch. And I was using it several months ago, and I broke it. It literally, it shattered. So I went to Sears to get my free lifetime replacement. Well, for this Craftsman tool. I spent a half hour there with the gal who was trying to figure out if they had them anymore, and they don't. They don't make it anymore. They've replaced it with this cheaper German version, which has half of the material in it. And I liked my broken one better than the replacement, that if they could get it, they'd have to order it online. If they could get it, I didn't like it as much as the one that was broken. So I said, I'll just file off the end of, or grind off the end of mine, and I'm just going to keep it, because they've taken material out of their tools. Craftsman screwdrivers used to be chrome vanadium, and they were chrome plated. Now a lot of the Craftsman screwdrivers are not even chrome plated. So they've removed cost yes. So even though I have lifetime guaranteed screwdrivers, if I go to replace them with the new version, the new versions are stamped steel screwdriver shafts. The old ones were ground on a grinder. Much more precision in the old ones. I'm talking about from the 70s and maybe even the 80s than the new ones. So the new Craftsman tools are not the same as the old Craftsman tools. And it's disappointing, and it's annoying.
It is springtime, so it's yard sale season. Start looking at tools at yard sales. People don't understand. You know, some guy, his grandpa dies, and he has 800 pounds of socket wrenches and sockets and screwdrivers and hacksaws and crap. He just wants a quarter apiece for each one. Whatever you want, just give me a quarter.
Yeah, all of it. That's how much we want. All of it, right? I mean, if that's the way it's going, yeah. And a lot of my tools, literally, were from my grandfather and from my father, and a lot of the companies that made those tools are no longer in business. But that doesn't mean they weren't world-class tools.
We have a whole generation now called the me generation, the millennials. They're so entitled and spoiled that no matter what happens in their life, they can hire somebody to fix it, or somebody will fix it, no matter what it is. So they don't need tools. Seriously, they don't need tools.
I bought a band saw, and did I need a band saw at the time? No, but I thought I would. So there was an ad in Craigslist for a bandsaw, and it was made by Rockwell. And this bandsaw is absolutely top of the line. Cast iron gears, heavy motor. I mean, this is top of the line, really heavy. And it's large. It's taller than I am, probably. And it came out of a shop class in Missouri. And some guy bought at auction, you know, all the tools out of the shop class, and then he was selling them. And I happened to find it, and I was the only guy that wanted this bandsaw. And I think it was maybe $200. And delivered. The guy said, would it be okay if I brought it to you? Well, sure, that'd be great. I was shocked, absolutely shocked. So, yes, you can get top quality tools at very, very reasonable prices. Now, I imagine that bandsaw, if it were new today, if Rockwell were making them, would be close to $2,000. I would guess. Mm-hmm. That'd be maybe $1,800 if it were made in America, like this one.
Well, now it's made in China, and they use Bondo to fill in any of the cast iron cracks or something on it, then they paint over the top of that.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's something that I wanted to talk about as well. The cast iron tables of table saws. This is something you should look out for. We'll talk about that when we come back. Kurt Wilson's with us, and joining us on the phone is George in New Hampshire. Welcome, George.
Hi, Vincent. Hello, Kurt.
Hi.
If you don't mind, I don't mean to take away from you talking about the cast iron. You mentioned rifles, and I figured with the expertise of you two gentlemen on, like, a rifle stock, you know what they called Hitler's Garand? It was the G43. You familiar with those, gentlemen?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Oh, okay. Yep. But you know, it's very hard to find wood for them. Well, I finally found the stock, but you know how they semi-sporterized them? They thin out at the wrist there, and at the comb there on the top of the stock. What I'm wondering, if you don't mind my asking, it's laminated wood. Could you gentlemen recommend something that I could do to kind of beef up that area or restore it to the point, even if it's not the most pretty thing? I want to get it more optical and stronger, so because I know it's very difficult to find the stocks.
Is this a original stock or is it a new stock?
No, it's an original stock.
Okay, there's nothing you can really do, because the original ones are soaked in oil. And it's permeated all the way in deep inside. I can teach you how to strip it down and make it look brand new, but you can't. Nothing will glue to it. Nothing will bond to it. You'd have to really You'd have to drill and screw and all of this stuff. Now, why don't you? So, where'd you find the stock?
I actually picked it up on eBay.
Okay, my suggestion: go to gunpartscorp.com. Okay, I used to own AMT firearms, and when I went out of business, I sold them everything, because everybody sells them everything. Gunpartscorp.com, and you can call them on a phone and tell them what you want. That's where I would get my G43 stocks.
Well, I would go to them, except I think if you wanted a reproduction stock that was made the way it originally was, they want like $350 on up, which to me is like a deal killer. But I appreciate the tip. But you see, the thing is, the G43s are so rare. As much as I've been able to find out, they only made them for about a year and a half, and there was a very bad winter in 1945 to 46 winter, that anything that was wood, whether it was floorboards or rifle stocks in the factories, people went in, raided them, and basically used them for firewood. So let's just say these things are rare as hen's teeth, but I'll just learn to live with it. But all right, no, I appreciate it. I'll get off, because I know you guys want to talk about that cast iron there, and I'm interested in listening to it too. But thanks, gentlemen. Okay. By the way, my grandmother was a Wilson. That's all I wanted to say. Take care. God bless.
Thanks, George. You know, George is one of our instructors, and he was a student, and he'd call in, and he's got just so much interesting information. And so that's George in New Hampshire, a really good guy. I've talked to him off the air, on the air, and I guess he tunes in most days. A wealth of information. Thank you, George in New Hampshire.
Okay. By the way, George, go back on eBay and look again, because there's an original one stock on there with forearm.
Excellent. Okay, so that's right on eBay right now. Okay, G43 stock. So we were talking about cast iron and the voids, if you will, the air bubbles in the castings of some of the parts of a cast iron table saw. And what you're talking about is the ones from China and Taiwan have these voids, and they fill them in. So instead of having a depression, they literally fill them in. Now mine is from Taiwan. It's made for Grizzly, and they filled it with brazing material, like brass. Now the problem with that is it looks okay from 3-4 feet away, but when you get closer, what you see is, or if you feel it, the brass or the bronze is raised from the cast iron platform. So it's not an ideal solution, but that's the problem.
They didn't grind it down?
They did, but it doesn't sand at the same level. Even when I try to sand it, I can't get it right. So even if I oil sand it with a 3M emery type cloth, I can't get it right. But it works. No. It's okay. But it's not like a U.S. made Delta, that's for sure. Or
I'll tell you a trick when we come back off the break about tabletop.
Okay. All right, we'll be right back after top of the hour news and commercial announcements. Kurt Wilson's with us, SE1.us, and also armchairsurvivalist.com. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Kurt Wilson's with us, SE1.us, SE, the number 1.us, and armchairsurvivalist.com. Kurt, can you just take a minute and tell us about your radio show?
Yeah. It's armchairsurvivalist.com. I'm on every Sunday, 2 to 4 Pacific time. And you go to my website, and it'll tell you how you can listen to me. I'm on the Internet, of course. I broadcast to my engineer in Pennsylvania, and he puts it on 2 shortwave towers and 2 satellites. And so I broadcast all over the world, not just on the Internet. And then I've got affiliates that I don't even know about all over the world. So it's a 2-hour show. I'm a trained investigative journalist. So what I do is I investigate all kinds of strange stuff, and you'll get more news out of me in 1 hour than you'll get from any other mainstream media in a whole week. And then that's the first hour. The second hour is always something that can help you survive a little bit better. And like I say on my show, when the humor hits the fan, you're not going to be in your bunker with 5 years of food and all kinds of guns and ammo. You're going to be sitting in your easy chair with an open can of beer, wondering why the hell is the electricity off. So I teach people how to survive with the tools they have, and I teach you the ability to extrapolate the data that you have accumulated over your life and to put that into emergency situations that can or might happen to you. So in other words, I teach how to work on your car, how to put a bug-out bag together for your car, for yourself, how to work on firearms, how to redo gun stocks and wood. I was a master gunsmith, 25 years. So, and how to use snowshoes, how to cook, how to clean, because people think, oh, yeah, let's take this wet rag and wipe that down. That's called cleaning. No. So all these different things that people need to know, and there's reasons behind these, and people don't grasp these now because, well, it's no longer important that you are taught these things because that has nothing to do with social justice. It has nothing to do with that whatsoever. So you're no longer taught. We've lost, Vinny. We've lost at a minimum of 4 generations in the United States of people who no longer. Not only do they not exhibit common sense, it's now considered intolerant for anyone to say, why don't you use common sense? Common sense is a superpower now. It's so rare. But that's my show. That's my show.
I agree, and thank you for doing that. Thank you for putting that up on the satellite and every medium that you use to get the message out. So, Kurt, I listened intently, and I went to the website gunpartscorp.com that you recommended, hour number 1, and I typed in a firing pin that I need for one of my handguns. And there it is. They've got it in stock.
Yep.
And it's an oddball. It's an oddball 22, and it keeps shattering the firing pins. And I keep thinking that they're too long, but they're at their correct length, and they keep shattering.
What do you have? What is the tip?
It's a Star Model F. It's a really good-looking 22.
Is that the Spanish one? Or
yes,
you have a semi-automatic?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a great little clinker.
Well, you've got to check. Now, there's a recoil spring. There's a firing pin recoil spring inside of there. Is it still there?
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Get that spring same time you get the firing pin.
Okay. $2.60 for the spring, $13.30 for the firing pin. Okay.
Yeah, and never dry fire that gun ever.
Right. By the way,
go ahead.
Do you like the looks of that particular handgun?
Is that the is that the model that looks like a Strunk 1911?
Sort of, yeah. Huh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're okay.
I think it's really cool. It's got a thumb rest. It's got a plastic grip, but I think I paid maybe $125 for it many, many years ago. I like the way it looked. By the way, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is still accurate. Quality handguns retain their value. Cheap handguns don't.
It all depends on the market. Years and years ago, remember Raven 22 and 25 automatic pistols?
Yes.
Cheapest crap you could buy. When they came out in the 70s, you could buy them for $29.95. And I used to buy them for $50 a piece, which is way above dealer cost. But I'd get them from a guy who brought them out the back door of Raven when they were in Reno, and I would sell them for $100 a piece to the people in the Central Valley, California, who worked on the farms, and they'd use them to shoot the rats that were so prevalent in the fields. Of course, I probably shouldn't say this, but that was 30 years ago. But yeah, good quality firearm if you take care of them.
Right.
If you don't, crap is crap. If you abuse it, if you don't clean it, and the rule of thumb, and I don't care who taught you different, if you shoot it, you clean it that day.
Absolutely.
And it'll outlast you. Be careful with it. Never dry fire a gun. If you're going to practice with it, put a spent cartridge in the chamber so that your firing pin doesn't. What happens is they go full extension. They go full range, and they're not made to do that. They're made to stop on a brass cartridge or a primer. So if you've got to be careful. What do they call them? The dry fire caps. Snap caps. Yeah. Yeah. You can go buy some snap caps. 22, they don't make them. They just use a spent cartridge.
Right. So if it's a center fire class, like a 25 caliber or a 32, or 38, 357, 9mm, 380, if it's center fire, you can get these snap caps. And they are cartridges that do not fire, but they're used for dry firing, meaning you can fire them without a live cartridge in there for practicing purposes without damaging the firing mechanism of your handgun or your rifle.
They usually, the primer, where it hits, the primer usually has a little tiny spring behind it.
That's exactly right.
It emulates, and they're usually red or green. I mean, you can't mistake them for an actual cartridge. But that's what you use for dry firing, yeah. And yeah, these 22 automatic pistols, semi-automatic pistols, the older ones made in the 60s, 70s, and 80s even, they will hold they don't hold value. They increase in value. I had a Star, the exact same one you have. Does yours have the 6-inch barrel or 4-inch barrel?
4-inch barrel.
Mine was a 6-inch barrel, and I paid $125 for it. And it was so accurate, it was scary.
That's
because I couldn't afford a Ruger.
Yeah. Well, I think this looks better than a Ruger. In a 4-inch barrel. But you're talking about the Ruger Mark II, is it?
Yeah.
And that's a great, reliable handgun class. If you don't mind a large frame, 22. That's a great little plinker to get used to an automatic. And it's relatively inexpensive, highly reliable, plenty common, and we have those too. And we made sure that our children knew how to shoot, and they trained with the Ruger Mark II. So that's, quality.
I got a trick for you. I got a trick for you on the table saw before I forget.
Yes, how to sand it.
So, okay, well, not just that. No, not how to sand it, how to use it. See, here, the table saws that I'm used to have steel tables, not cast iron tables. They would use cast iron as the framework, but they would have a like a half-inch slab of steel on top that was polished. When you're ripping a 12-foot section of board, even an 8-foot section, you want it to be smooth. Okay, so what we used to do is prior to any work, we would wipe off the top of the table, make sure somebody hadn't spilled Coke on it or something, and then we would spray it down with silicone spray, just 99-cent silicone spray. Spray it down. Okay, don't wipe it. You don't need to wipe it off. Spray it down, and then the next rip you do is going to go like, holy moly, this is so smooth. And all during the shift, I would brush it off, and I would spray it down some more, and it would just, the boards would come just right straight through. Now, if you don't have a steel plate, a table, and you have cast iron or you have an uneven surface, we have at times, and I hate to say this, but we've literally used Bondo to level it, and then we would rubber cement a sheet of linoleum on top of it. Not linoleum.
Formica.
Yeah, Formica, and the white. So it's really slick, and we rubber cement it so we can remove it if we have to, if we tear it up.
What a great way to go! That's really clever, Kurt. Very clever. And how do you sand smooth the irregular surface that are dissimilar metals? For example, the bronze or the brass filler that was used to fill up the voids in cast iron.
That's the problem. Bronze is 3 times as hard as cast iron is, so you're right, you can't. The only way that I could ever see to do that is to use a Dremel tool and a straight edge and just try and take down the bronze as best I can.
Yeah. So I have these little bumps, and I've just been living with it. When we come back, we're talking about spring cleaning, and I'd like to mention what we've learned about shower curtains. Really, really simple fix to a plague that just doesn't go away. If you have a moldy shower curtain, it's a really easy fix. It involves the trash can, but we're going to tell you how to fix that. Kurt Wilson's with us. Kurt, when we built our house 13 years ago here in Missouri, our farmhouse, we put in 5-foot shower pans and tiled the walls. And the idea was we did not want the glass shower doors, and there are a bunch of reasons why. Now, initially, it may seem that the glass shower doors would be a better way to go, but in my opinion, the air doesn't circulate inside the shower stall, if you will, with the glass doors as well as it does if you can open up the curtains. And then the problem is that if you use these vinyl shower curtains, they attract mold because they don't dry. There are folds that the moisture gets trapped into, and after a few days, you get mold, whether it be brown, tan, black, white. They grow mold. And I've never been to a house that had a shower with a vinyl shower curtain that didn't have a problem with mold. So the answer is you throw out the vinyl one, and you get a nylon one or a polyester one. And I just looked up the price on eBay. For less than $20, typically you can get a nylon shower curtain. And if you get one that is kind of an off-white color, it works really well. And then you can wash it in the washing machine all by itself with half a load of water, not the low setting, not the high setting, but mid setting, and a small amount of detergent, and a gentle cycle, and then wash it in the washing machine, then hang it on the line, and it will last years. Now, how many years, I don't know, because ours looks almost brand new, and it's been used for 13 years. So that's my answer for the shower curtain.
That's pretty good.
It's really a great way to go. It's very lightweight, and when you look at it, you'll say, there's no way this is going to keep the water from flying out through the shower curtain, but it does. It really does. Now, this isn't my original idea. I learned this by going to a motel or a hotel many, many decades ago, and I noticed that they didn't have vinyl shower curtains. I thought, why is that? There's got to be a reason. And by the way, the shower curtains don't have mold on them. There's got to be a reason. And the reason is they wash them. And they put them in, the standard washing machine, and it works great. So you really don't need chlorine bleach. If you just put a small amount of detergent in there, you will be impressed with how long they last. And if you take care of it, you probably won't have to buy another one. So we have 2 showers that are that size, and we have 3 shower curtains, just in case. The third one is just in case, but, the first 2 have lasted so long. Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, that's a good idea. It's most people, when they go into move into an apartment or something, they want, they go get the $1.99 Walmart special shower curtain, and then they wonder why it sticks to itself over time, and it doesn't move properly, and then you start seeing discoloration, and the nylon one's better. It looks almost fabric. Is that what it looks almost fabric? Yeah.
Right.
And same thought, like, how the hell does this stop water? Well, it's like canvas. As soon as it gets wet, the pores tighten up. Water just doesn't go through it. But for those of us with a door, one of the problems you have in water, and that this could be the kitchen, this could be the bathroom, it doesn't matter, laundry room even, the hot water heater, is that you have hard water, or you get calcium. You get these minerals into the water that when they dry, they create what you call it hard water marks. Like, we have a high level of calcium in Coeur d'Alene, and your shower, the shower doors, they look white, and you can, on the tub, you can actually run your hand along the edge of the tub. You can feel the different layers of crud. I mean, they're not loose. This is solid. This stuff is solid, like calcified rock. And so there's all kinds of stuff, cleaners out there. And one of the things people do is I'm going to go buy this special cleaner. I'm going to buy this special cleaner. You don't need special cleaners. My wife cleans her bathroom, the bathroom here, with a mixture of dishwash soap and vinegar, and sprays it. Well, water, and then some dishwasher soap because it cuts grease, and then vinegar because it cuts the hard stuff. She sprays down in the shower, and lets it sit for like 5 minutes. Of course, it smells like you're roasting beef in there for a while, but that stuff comes up, and the tub ends up slick as glass.
Yep. All right, we'll be right back. Kurt Wilson's with us, and Kurt, when I was a lot younger, back in the 70s, I'd work on cars, actually in the 60s as well, and I encountered a number of frozen nuts, bolts, screws, large Phillips screws, flathead screws. I just couldn't get them loosened. So, of course, we would use liquid wrench back then. But I bought a tool, and I still have it to this day. I have all the parts of it. It was made by a company called KD, and the part number was 1140, KD 1140. And what it is it's a hand impact driver, and it will help you remove frozen fasteners. And it's the coolest thing. Do you really?
Yeah.
Well, I only have one, and it's something that I don't use it all the time. But here's the purpose of this. So this thing is a cylinder, a little smaller than the core of a roll of paper towels. It's made out of steel, and it's cylindrical, and let's say it's 7 inches long. And on one end is a 3/8 inch drive, like a ratchet drive, and an adapter for 4 screwdriver tips, large and small Phillips and large and small slotted. And what happens is you can set this thing to either tighten or loosen. So if you have a screw or a nut or a bolt that just doesn't want to come off, and you haven't yet rounded it off, you can use that liquid wrench or penetrating oil, or 50% acetone and 50% automatic transmission fluid, which is actually the very, very best. And you can use this impact driver. And what you do is you put you can use it with a socket, you can do that, or you can use the screwdriver tips, whatever the fasteners that you're trying to loosen, and you tap this with a hammer. And what happens is this device shocks with an impact of the hammer what you're trying to loosen, and at the same time it will either twist it off or twist it on, depending how you set it. And the tool is $19. Yes.
It's spring loaded. You left that out. It's a ultra heavy duty spring inside of it that barely moves. What it's doing is when you tap it with a hammer, you're transferring kinetic energy to not only directly down, which will jar the crud that's holding the screw or nut or whatever. It'll jar it loose. It directs it to one side or the other, left or right. Yeah, in gunsmithing, the reason I have two, I have one it's real small. It's smaller than one you have, and it's specifically for firearms. And I have like 50 different screw heads that I could put on this thing. That's the big thing in firearms is the screws that are on them, because they're proprietary and they're perfectly flush, and they really look nice for cosmetically. But when you start screwing around and you use the wrong screwdriver, you'll strip them out real fast. And then I have one twice the size you have for taking off head bolts.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you don't tap it. You smack the son of a gun with a 5-pound.
Yeah, a little hand sledgehammer. Yeah, so this is something that you may want to look up, class. It's something that has served me very well for decades, and it's a specialty tool that maybe people don't know about, but it's really handy, relatively inexpensive. Now, I found one, the one that I have and you have is $20, but shipping is about $20. So by the time you're done, or by the time they're done with you, you're at about $40. But there's one that looks very similar, and it's made by a company called Tekton, Tekton, and theirs is available in a case. Looks like a copycat of the KD tool. It's obviously imported. It's an Asian one, and it's $19.12 on eBay. So that's the tool that we're talking about. I'm looking at some of these other things that, some other kinds of tools that are kind of neat that I've bought over the years. One of them is a scroll saw. It's like a jigsaw, except the head will let you rotate the blade 360 degrees any way you want.
There's a little lock on it. There's a lock on the top of the thing. You can either with your right hand move the saw in your left hand, adjust where the blade's going to go, or you can lock it 90 degrees to the left. You can lock it 180 degrees backwards, so you're cutting backwards. I've got one.
Is yours Craftsman? Mine's Craftsman.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it was made by the Singer sewing machine company back then. I'm not positive, but a number of the Craftsman tools back from the 70s and 80s were made by Singer, and I don't know if they do it anymore. But it's a really handy scroll saw, and I'm sure you can find one on eBay. Another thing I looked up during the break, I typed in impact hammer. And I was thinking of a very specific one that I'd like that's about a 500 foot-pound twin hammer, pneumatic, so it's air-powered. And why? Because, believe it or not, I've worn out the one in our shop that we have. It's made by, it's called a Husky brand. I really like the way it feels. It's not the best. It's not an Ingersoll Rand. It's not a Snap-on, and it doesn't cost, the 10 times more that the Snap-on would. But it's really handy, but I've worn it out, so it's not as strong as it used to be, but it still works. And so I was looking for one like it, about 500 foot-pounds of torque. And so I went to eBay and I typed in impact hammer. And you know what I find? Most of the search results are cordless impact hammers. Now that's the last thing I want. I want one that's going to last a really long time, and one that I'm not going to have to spend $50 for a replacement battery for a $55 impact hammer. But I was really surprised that most of the results are cordless. And I guess that's because not everybody has a compressor, which is something that we also ought to talk about. So do you have any thoughts on impact hammers or impact wrenches?
Yeah, it's the standard. There's a kit. The Ingersoll Rand sells a kit. And this looks like a drill. It's steel. The handles are. The unit is. It looks like a drill, and you hook it into your compressor, and you have different heads you can put on it. And what it does is when it goes real fast, it just bap, 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 bap. It's used in it's used in body work. It's used in exhaust work. It helps you cut off the stuck mufflers, and it's just like brrr, it's loud as hell, but it does the job so fast. And here's the thing about these special tools, and this is the sad thing: you only use them generally once or twice a year. But if you don't have them, instead of a 30-second job, it'll take you 2 hours.
Yeah.
And this is the sad thing. But again, Ingersoll Rand sells a kit that you can buy that has the impact hammer. It also has the lug wrench or the what do you call it?
Well, actually, it's called an impact wrench. You're talking about there are two things we're talking about: air chisels, and impact wrenches, right? Or impact hammers.
Yeah. So they have like 3 different units in there, and I think it cost me on sale like $75.
What a deal!
Yeah,
what a deal! Yeah, and if you're going to work on an exhaust system, they're rusted. I mean, 100% of the time they're rusted. So because of the heat and the water, you drive through the rain and the salt, and it's just it's a tough proposition to work on an exhaust system. So if you have one of these impact chisels or air chisels, what a great way to go, because they come with these hardened chisels, and you can cut right through an exhaust pipe. It's really a great way to go.
I remember the times underneath a car with a hacksaw cutting off the damn muffler that had rusted on, and then having to modify the new muffler so that it would fit over the part that I just cut off, and on and on and on. And the guy next door, after I'm done with the work, he comes over and goes, "Why didn't you just ask me? It would have taken me 5 minutes."
Right.
Because he had the right tool.
Right. So we're talking about air chisels and impact hammers. And we use, and here's a word of caution. Of course, you want to wear safety glasses and hearing protection when you use these. Word of caution. If you have your tires dismounted at a tire shop, they will typically use an impact wrench to loosen the lug nuts or bolts and tighten them. And there's a specific order that the lug nuts or lug bolts must be tightened in with an increasing amount of torque as you go from bolt to bolt to bolt or nut to nut to nut. And if they use an impact wrench, they can bend your wheel right then and there. Because what they typically do is take the first lug nut or lug bolt and they put the wheel on. They'll run up that first lug nut all the way, full torque, and it will bend the wheel. What you do is, what we do here at the farm is we may use an impact wrench and run them up maybe to 20 pounds, just snug. And we would go in a star pattern. We don't go around in a circle. We go in a star pattern. So we go, if it's 6 lugs or 6 bolts, we will go the first one maybe at 12 o'clock, the next one at 6 o'clock, then at 9 o'clock, then at 3 o'clock. You know, that kind of a...
Right.
To give you an idea, if there were 4, that's how we would do it. You go across, and then you increase the torque. So we go from like 20 to 40 foot-pounds, from 40 to 60, and then from 60 to 80, and then from 80 to 100. And that's the way we do it. And that way you don't bend your wheels. And you go in that star pattern. So you never...
What?
What I was going to say is, we never torque them without a torque wrench, and we do it by hand. We use the impact gun to take the lug nuts off, but not to torque them back on.
That's right. When we do, we swap out our studded tires, snow tires, every year for our normal tires, and we do it ourselves. Well, once we've moved them, we take a wire brush, we clean the threads, and then wipe them down good, and then put a coat of molybdenum grease on there. And so they're easier to get on, easier to get off. Yeah, you tighten them down, and then you use a clicker wrench and lock
torque
that
wrench.
thing down. Torque wrench, 100 pounds. Yep.
Kurt Wilson's with us. Now, Kurt, since we've talked about air tools, let's take a couple of minutes and talk about compressors. The first compressor I bought was in the 70s, and it was a Craftsman with a twin-cylinder, 20-gallon cast iron compressor head. Still have it. Still works fine. It was pretty well made. I think the head was made by DeVilbiss. And when I moved to Missouri, I brought it with me as a roll-around. It's on wheels. It has a horizontal tank. And I bought another one. This one was from Lowe's, and I really liked the look of the black tank with this specific cast iron compressor head. And it's about 120 pound PSI, but it's a 60 gallon, and both of these are oiled, not oil-less. They are quieter than the oil-less. They'll last longer, in my opinion. What are your thoughts on the right size compressor for most people to have? Because I think it would be handy for every person who has a home, who has automobiles, to have a compressor. It seems like something you just have to me.
Well, if you're just going to use it to take on and off a set of tires now and then and do a little bit of work now and then and maybe blow out your garage now and then, you don't need anything heavy duty. You don't need a 20 to 80 gallon tank. You can get by with some of the compressors they sell at Costco. Now, I do not like the oilless ones because use some common sense. Oil not only lubricates the internals, but it helps dissipate heat. So these oilless ones are made for somebody who uses it 3 or 4 times a year. Now, if you're going to be using it on a daily basis, you do not want the cycle to be chronically starting, stopping, because you'll burn that thing out in no time. So you have to get a compressor that's powerful enough and holds enough pressure for you to use in whatever you're doing. We would be bead blasting at the gun shop. Well, I had a 100-gallon tank with a 5 horsepower cast iron DeVilbiss head on it, and that kept it. It could go up to almost 200 pounds, but it kept it easily at 120 pounds all day long. And we use it sometimes 8 hours a day. You want to keep it cool. This is important. We had external fans blowing on this to help cool it because there's no radiators. There's just a little, you got the radiator heads on them, just some flaps of cast iron hanging out. And the other thing is change the oil in it. If you get the one with oil, there's a reason. Change it. I've just said this, and I guarantee you there's a dozen people going, change the oil? Oh, crap, I never thought of that.
Yeah, there's a plug to fill it, and there's a plug to drain it. Yeah, that's what they're for.
And you get it drained, you're going to see garbage coming out of there. You go, oh, my God. And if you happen to see if it looks metallic, well, you kind of burned out your bearings. And that's the bad thing there. I had the one you have. You're talking about the roll around?
Yeah.
My first one was one of those. And I didn't know what I'm telling you now. So I was using that thing 4, 5, 6 hours a day straight. And I'd have to slow down my work. And I was working out of my garage at the time. And it started to sound like 2 marbles in a tin can after a while. Mm-hmm. That's wearing out the piston. Well, you know what Slick 50 is, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Teflon.
It's Teflon. I was ready to throw this thing away, literally, because it was blowing water, and I can't have that when I'm bead blasting. And it was blowing oil. The rings were gone. Everything was pretty much bad to it. Well, this guy that works for UPS comes to me, and he goes, I got this Teflon that we put in the UPS engines, the diesel engines there. I'm going to give you some. He gave me literally 2 ounces. That's all. And it's pure Teflon. It's liquid. 2 ounces of it. I changed the oil on my compressor, added this to it, ran it for an hour with no pressure, just loose, opened up the air valve, and I kept that thing for another 10 years, and it ran like perfect. So if you take care of a compressor, it'll last. But you really should have one, because you're going to find a time that you're going to, damn, I wish I had a compressor.
Yeah, and I don't know if you should buy a used one or not, because if you buy one that's been in a garage, meaning a service station, it's probably very well used. Might not have a lot of life left in it. So I don't have the answer whether you should buy a new one. But if you're going to buy a new one, make sure it's cast iron and an oil type. Kurt Wilson, thank you so much for being with us. You'll be back again and again. I love broadcasting with you. Thank you again.